we're on to block number 2 of our series. And so that is the 9 patch. So we did 4 last time, now we're doing 9. It adds a little bit more complication to it, but not a lot. You just have to understand the same concepts. And this is when you start realizing how understanding your process and how you want things to flow is really helpful, because it's easy to confuse which one you were supposed to put where and accidentally put a seam where it wasn't supposed to be. And so you don't want that to happen. So this is what we should turn out with. You can do a 9 patch in 9 different colors if you want it to be super scrappy. I think it looks really cool when you have this kind of tic-tac-toe pattern going on. And so this way you have to have 5 blocks of this fabric and 4 of this. But you can do it in any sort of variation that you want. That is the beauty of quilting, because if you see something different that you want to do with it, you just change the fabric up and it makes the block look completely different, even though it's the exact same thing. So with this one, I'm going to use these 2 fabrics, and we're going to do the traditional one first, and then I'll show you the slightly easier, but not by a lot, modern method. So let me go ahead and set this aside and we'll start cutting this out. Okay, so here's my selvage on this side. I had to give them a quick iron because they seemed awful wrinkly. And that one's biting me. There we go. And this is another one of those half yards that I got. A lot of times if you're not sure exactly what you want to do with something and you just want to several different fabrics that kind of look good together, a half yard is a good thing to go with, and it's usually fairly cost effective, and especially if you can get some decent little sales at the local craft stores or the coupons that they have, you can get some pretty good deals. And so you'll notice I told you they are terrible at cutting this sometimes, and so never ever rely on someone else's cutting to make sure it's straight, because it will never ever be straight. And so I want to line this up so I can cut that selvage off. There have been occasions where I was really close on a project and I just needed a little bit more of a fabric that I've used the selvage, because if you don't use a lot of it, it's going to wind up in your seam allowance anyway. But it's usually not a good idea because the texture is all wrong and it stretches weird. It doesn't act like the rest of the fabric. And so usually you just want to cut that selvage off, and then you have a straight line to go with. And on this one I need 4.5-inch squares. And so I'm going to go at 4.5. Up, make sure 1, 2, 3, 4.5. It just makes me feel better sometimes to actually tap it out and make sure that I'm doing the number that I thought I was doing. So now I'll move that. And I may need to cut another one, so I'm just going to fold that over so that I don't make a total mess of it and don't have to start all over on lining things up. the blue piece is short on this back side, so I'm going to start over here, trim that down, and then I'll see how many I can get off of here. Remember, I need 5 of one, 4 of another, and I don't really care which is which. Sometimes you do want to consider which one is darker and stuff like that, because it might make the weight of the square look a little different. And so there are times where you look at it and you're like, oh, that just looks off because of the darkness of one feels heavy in certain areas than the other. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5. So that's 1. That's 2. Let's see if I can get, it looks like I can. 4.5, yep, I'll make it. And again, those are big enough that I can use those in something else. So those will go on my scrap pile, not my trash pile. Alright, so I got 4. But I need 1 more. So let me see. I'm going to go ahead and cut another long one because I'm going to have to do it anyway. So 4. See, I removed my ruler first, which that wasn't great, but it worked out. It's just not best practice to do that. So then again, let me make sure that my blue is actually crossing over there and that it's lined up like it needs to be. And a lot of times, directional, this is a definitely directional fabric. A lot of times those can have optical illusions when you are cutting, and so it makes it hard to really see if you're going straight, if you've got these wiggly lines drawing your eye in different directions. And so sometimes you got to really focus in on it and try to shut out those extra little things your brain's trying to tell you. Alright, and actually I did get that off somehow. So I'll square it up. So that was just sloppy cutting because I've got just a hair at that top. There we go. Now we're good and square. So now I have 5 of each and I only need 4 of one of those, so that's fine. And I can use this later. So now what I'm going to do, and with this I can decide how I want to do it. And these are both directionals. This one's not terribly because it can go either way this way, but if I turned it this way on one, it would drive me insane. And so since this one's directional up and down, I'm going to make this one directional up and down too. And then I'm going to play with it and see how I want things actually set up. Now this one is very directional because if I suddenly turn this that way, that's going to throw everything off in my brain. So I need to make sure that the arrows are actually pointing in the same direction. So do I like it like this, or would I like it better like this? think I like the other one better. Something about that blue makes it feel a little more grounded with it being in the center like that. So I'm going to go with that. Now you might look at that and go, oh, she made a terrible decision. And that is totally okay, because this is my quilt and I like it this way, but that doesn't mean everybody will. And so that's what the beauty of quilting is you make it to where you think it looks the best to you. And so now I know I'm going to seam all of these edges. Trim these apart. I'm going to iron them really quick, and then I will show you how to add the next pieces. Okay, so I laid them back in the order that I had them so that I knew I was grabbing the right piece. And now I'm going to add this piece on this side. This is my bottom row. This is my middle row. And my top row. And by laying it out again into the same configuration, I can make sure I'm keeping my directionals the right direction. All right, and now I'll go iron it one more time. So top row, middle row, bottom row. Now you will notice, I'm going to flip these over. Well, I messed that one up. I need to flip this one this other way because, like I said, we want to lock those ditches together. And so with this one, I need to make sure, and I messed them all up apparently, because that needs to be the opposite of that. So that needs to be going on the inside. These are both going outside. These both need to be going inside. And that one needs to be going outside. So let me redo those. So opposite here and opposite there. Now let's see if I got them right. So middle row, top row. All of my directions are going the same direction. Now let's make sure all of my seams are going the opposite direction. There we go. So these are going out this way, these are going in this way, these are going out that way, so that I can lock those ditches together and they should line up perfectly. So let me flip them back over. And I'm going to take the middle one and hold it over the top one. And I know this is the seam I've got to do. Now this is where I might clip or pin something, just so that they stay together, and if I need to fudge anything, I can kind of see what I can do to make that happen. So I'm going to clip that there. Alright, so that one looks like it lined up just right. So I'll put this right in there. And then as I start getting close, I'll just pull that off. Iron it one more time. Now I'm going to put this one up here, and I've got to do the same right here. Okay. Oops. Now that unraveled some, but it's not the end of the world. I've still got plenty of seam allowance, so I'm not worried about it. And iron it one last time and I'll show you what I got. right, so there is our finished 9 patch. And so it looks good. You might notice a little bit of overlap right here. It doesn't bother me, so I'm good with that. And again, whenever you quilt it, maybe you can hide that a little bit. So it's not the end of the world if these look a little bit wonky and you feel a little bad about it, but it's not like horribly off. If it is horribly off, then you might want to go ahead and redo it. But when it's just a tiny bit off like that, there's stuff that you can do later on that will fix that, or just don't worry about it because no one else is going to look that close at it. And even if they do, they'll still love it because you made it for them. So here's this one. Let me show you how to do the modern pieced one. Working with a tired brain will make you make little mistakes and really big mistakes all the time. So when you are crafting, and this is one of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn, when your brain is getting tired and you start making little mistakes, it's best to stop and pick it up later when you've had some rest, because that will lead you to a big mistake, which I did not see because my tired brain could not see it at the time until I started editing the video. And you may have noticed as I was talking in the last segment of the video that I was talking about how these directional ones really needed to be going in the same direction. And I did fine here, they're going this way, but then I completely swapped this last panel all the way around, so all of these are pointing the opposite direction. And now that my brain is not tired, it screams at me that it is a horrible, horrible mistake. And so this is definitely one that I am going to use my handy seam ripper for. I'm going to rip this out, turn it around, and sew it back down. And so give me just a minute and I will show you what that looks like. So when you're using your seam ripper, one of the things that helps you a lot and to speed this along is to figure out which side is the bobbin side. Now you'll see one side that looks like stitches like you think of whenever you think of a sewing machine stitch. It goes in, it has a little space, and it comes back out. That's typically your top side, so that's your needle side. The bobbin side just looks like a straight line, and finding the bobbin side is actually helpful because I can now use my seam ripper to just kind of ease up under one of those stitches and just push through it, and it pops it. And then I'm actually going to use the back side because this part of the seam ripper is actually really sharp, and so it just cuts through the fabric, or cuts through the thread, and it can cut through your fabric if you're not being careful. So make sure that when you put it in there you don't accidentally stab into your fabric as well. So now I'm just going to use the back side to kind of go through and pick out some of these so I can get a decently sized tail. And then it doesn't always work, and it doesn't always go very far, but usually if you can get a big enough tail, oh, and I broke it. If you can get big enough tail that you can pull it, and this is sometimes when little locking pliers are really handy. And then I can pull this out. And it just saves me a little time having to go one by one and try to undo it. And then I will oftentimes come to the other side and start doing this, because then I can pull these to where there's a little bit more of a loop hanging out, and I can just kind of hook those and catch a couple at the same time. And this is when like one of those sticky lint rollers would be really handy, because you're going to have tiny little pieces of thread stuck in here. And so you can just roll over it and hopefully grab most of that out without having to go back and use your fingers to pick every little piece out. Then again, you can go with my theory of it's not that big a deal, no one's going to see it anyway. If you miss a few pieces, no one's going to notice in the end. But anytime you do use a seam ripper, you are going to start getting these little bitty pieces of thread all over your workspace, and it will become annoying after a while where you have to sweep it up and take care of it. Alright, so I've got that one off. And then once I'm done with this, I will go ahead and iron it again, and this time be extra cautious of how I am orienting that final row so that I don't turn it around yet again, because that can easily happen and you have to rip it out again and do it again until you get it right. So just for expediency's sake, I am not going to bother picking all those out. I'm just going to iron this real fast. And now I'm going to really look at my orientation and make sure that they are going in the right directions, and I'm going to flip it this way because I'm sure what I did was just did it like this, and that of course turns it wrong. So flip it up, make sure that it's still going in the right direction, and then let's sew it back down real fast. Oh, so I'll have to look at that. Okay. So now my bobbin's being all crazy. And those are things that happen with your machine. And so now I finally have it going in the correct direction. So always pay attention, and when your body is telling you to stop, it's best to just go ahead and stop. So to do the modern method, I again need 2 pieces of fabric. And so have that lined up. I've already trimmed this edge, so that one's good and straight. I need a 4.5 inch strip by 18 inches. So 4.5. Clean this edge up. Sometimes my brain doesn't want to work. Okay, 18 inches. Alright, so I had just at 18. So there we go there. So now I'm going to make one really long seam there and line it up appropriately. Okay, now I have to cut. I'm going to start from this side. This one's lined up just a little bit better. That one's just a hair off. So start on this side, 4.5 inches. I'm going to do my best to square it up as I go. And you probably think I'm talking like this out loud to myself just for the camera, but I'd hate to tell you that I usually do this while I'm working anyway, because it helps my brain to know that I've actually thought through this process and I'm going, yes, 4.5. And saying it out loud just kind of lets me know that I'm really paying attention and actually not missing something. So now I should have just 4.5. Did I make it? Yes, I did. All right. So now what I'll do is I'll line these up like I want them to go. And then this is the weird part. I need one more of these blue ones if I'm going to do it like that, which I think I will. So I need to cut one more blue one to fit right here. And then what I'll do is I'm going to sew these together. I'll just go ahead and do that. Lay it out again, make sure I'm putting it where I want it to be. I'm not going to bother ironing it this time. Let's go ahead and get these seams done. that piece done. And now I just need to cut this. Hopefully it's 4.5 inches. Let's see. Just out. Alright, so this one's already cut 4.5 that way. So I'm going to cut it 4.5 this way. Man, I'm making my life too hard here. Okay, let's fix this to where it's actually easy for me to do. Alright, so and line it up to the right side. And this is the part of the evening where it's your brain telling you, maybe you should stop doing this. But I'm going to plow through and I'm going to get done with this. And then I will do another one tomorrow. So, okay, now I'm going to add this one over here. Now these are geometric, but they're not directional, so I can flip it however I want and no one's ever going to notice that it's different. Check and see how it's done, because I need to nest these the opposite way, so that means these need to go in. Okay, so here's that. I need to turn it this way. This is definitely when your brain's saying call it a day, because I couldn't even tell which way was up there. Okay, so I didn't do anything that wrong. I'm going to go ahead and use this side because it's a little straighter. So there's our finished 9 patch. Now, this is one of those where I honestly think doing it the modern method is a little harder. I mean, it just, I don't know if it's just my brain, I don't know. But I also don't like that you have one weird ditch after that. And so you do have something that your brain doesn't really read as knowing what the problem is, but you see something odd on this seam. And that's because these ditches are going this way, and then suddenly there's a ditch that goes all the way that way. And you don't recognize that directly in your brain. Like, it doesn't just automatically register, but your eye is seeing something odd. And so I personally don't like the modern method for this one, but if you are a true believer and want to use that, that is totally fine. And you'll notice I got a little wonky over here. I think that's probably because I've done too much today. And honestly, I may use this, I may not. I might decide to use my other one instead. But I'll use this in something. I haven't wasted my time. I'll use it in something else where I don't feel like it's going to be that strong of a piece that people won't notice it as much. So that is how you do a 9-patch, and if you do have questions, again, let me know. My email is laura@salinecountylibrary.org. Have a great day.